Today on Don't Talk TV, I want to take a quick look at the criminal code as it relates to the charge of obstruct peace officer. It's something that comes up once in a while and has come up in some interesting circumstances with respect to individuals protesting lockdowns, so I thought it'd be something interesting to look at. Hello, my name is Nicholas Wansbutter. I'm a criminal defense lawyer in Stratford, Ontario, Canada, and welcome to Don't Talk TV. So as I indicated in the preamble, something that I've been looking into in respect to a couple of cases I've heard about has been the question of what constitutes obstruct justice, especially in some little bit more unique circumstances that I've been hearing about of individuals being charged with obstructing justice when attending so-called freedom rallies or anti-lockdown rallies. So the starting point as a criminal lawyer, whenever I'm looking into any criminal offense, is to look at what does the criminal code say? What are the elements of the offense that a prosecutor has to prove if they're seeking a conviction on someone for that charge? So let's look at the criminal code. The offense of obstruct justice comes under section 129 of the Criminal Code of Canada, and it indicates that everyone who A, resists or willfully obstructs a peace officer or peace officer in the execution of his duty, or any person lawfully acting in aid of such an officer, B, omits without reasonable excuse to assist a public officer or peace officer in execution of his duty, or C, resists or willfully obstructs any person in the lawful execution of a process against lands or goods in making a lawful distress or seizure, is guilty of an indictable offense with a maximum of 2 years, or if the Crown proceeds summarily, an offense punishable on summary conviction. So usually the section that comes up most often is subsection A, resisting or willfully obstructing a public officer or peace officer in the execution of his duty. So given that definition under the criminal code, let's break it down a bit. There's essentially 5 elements that the Crown Attorney has to prove. First of all, they have to prove that the person who was allegedly obstructed was a peace officer and that they were acting in the lawful execution of their duties. So, for example, if an arrest is an unlawful arrest, an individual is not required to submit to that arrest because the officer is not in the lawful execution of their duties. They're objectively committing an assault by conducting an unlawful arrest, which is an arbitrary detention under Section 9 of the Charter. Whereas an officer who's making a lawful arrest, that would be an example of being in the execution of lawful duty. The second element is that the accused person must be aware that this individual is a peace officer, or willfully blind to the fact that they're a peace officer. Now, this is usually going to be pretty easy to prove because generally peace officers are wearing uniforms, very clearly identifiable uniforms, so it would be hard to not know that they're a peace officer. Third element is that the allegedly obstructive action must be an intentional act by the accused person. So not something that's accidental. For example, if you accidentally bump into a police officer, you're not intentionally obstructing them when you do that. So it has to be something that you're doing on purpose. The fourth element is the act or omission that's being charged, or that's the subject of the charge, must actually make it more difficult for the officer to do their duty. And the fifth element is that the person must do that act with the intention of making the officer's duty more difficult. So they have to intend to do the act itself, but they have to also intend that the act will make the officer's job more difficult. Now, I recently heard of an individual who was charged with obstruct justice, and the act that allegedly of the obstruction was asking an officer for their name and badge number. Now, there isn't a lot of case law on this ground. I suspect that's because it would be extremely rare that police would actually charge someone for obstruction for asking for their badge number, because it's clearly something that you're legally entitled to do. But I did find a case from Manitoba where someone was charged under those circumstances, and let's just take a look at that case because I think it'll take us through the process and show why that's not obstruction. So the case is Her Majesty the Queen and KSHW. It's just the initial of the person because it was a young offender. So let's just go down here, a little bit of summary of the facts in paragraph 3. Basically, one young person named SB was being detained by police and then ultimately being arrested, and the SB's friend, HW, became upset and entered into this. So the officer, here paragraph 3, when it says she, that's referring to the officer, she testified that he began demanding Constable Pole's badge number or name while yelling and swearing and advancing toward the officer. When she called for backup, 2 other officers arrived and quickly arrested HW for causing a disturbance. Both were also charged with obstruction of Officer Pole in the execution of her duties. So the obstruction towards Constable Pole was apparently asking for her name and badge number. Going down to paragraph 82 of the decision, the court ruled this way. Said, with respect to HW, the Crown argued his shouting and yelling and demanding the officer's badge number while advancing towards her made her job of arresting SB for causing a disturbance more difficult and amounted to obstruction. Dealing with HW's conduct, I cannot conclude that even if the Crown's allegations were established that HW advanced toward Constable Pole shouting, swearing, and demanding her badge number, such conduct amounts to obstruction. It is common ground that he was demanding the constable's badge number and she repeatedly refused to give it to him. He had a lawful right to this information. So then the conclusion is that although I have no doubt he raised his voice, I cannot conclude that his conduct amounted to obstruction. Now that decision just seems common sense, but it's good to have a case that you can actually refer to where this has been found, that asking for something you're legally entitled to, being the officer's name and badge number, is not obstructing them. It may actually make their job a bit more difficult because they'd have to pause whatever they're doing to answer you, but it would certainly fail on the test of intending to obstruct them. And I'm not sure they're in the lawful execution of their duty anymore when they're refusing to give you information that they have to. Now, this video is not legal advice. If you need legal advice, contact a lawyer. You can call myself or another lawyer. My 1-855 number and website are listed below, and we can give you advice that's specifically tailored to your circumstances. If there's topics you'd like to see me cover on this show, please send me an email at the address below or leave a comment in the comments section. And if you found this video at all helpful or informative, please consider liking, sharing, and subscribing, following me on social media. And also keep in mind that we're not only on Rumble, but we're on Odyssey now. So I'd highly recommend that you subscribe to Don't Talk TV on one or both of those platforms in the event that I'm deplatformed off of YouTube. So once again, thanks for watching, and see you again next week.